Stage 2 Physical Education Group Dynamics Task, Tom Bignell. The Group Dynamics task conducted involved a 5-week AFL experience for Year 2 students. Through initial discussion, it was organised that the allocation of one 80-minute session per week was to be run for Year 2 students, with 2 double lessons dedicated to planning and the analysis of game and benchmarking statistics. The overall aim of the Group Dynamics AFL experience was to improve the fundamental skill development of the Year 2 students through skill development activities and drills, incorporated with increasing participation levels to see improvement in the AFL games. Benchmarking would provide a measurable reference of progression along with statistical data to show both skill and participation improvement over 5 weeks. Through the initial planning of the Year 2 AFL experience, class and individual group meetings constructed a list of ideas on a whiteboard helping conclude decisions for an overall plan. Discussion points were drawn up as shown below in the following table. Session planning was dictated and decided through group meetings between Zach and myself where the following was discussed. Both myself and Zach collaborated as a group by filling the roles of both tactical and technical coaches to help improve both skills through technical coaching and participation and inclusion through technical coaching. The specific roles are highlighted in the table shown below. Through initial planning, SMART goal was drawn up between Zach and myself, and we discussed priorities as being an increase in participation in game-based environments through implementation of strategies derived from data collection and fundamental skill development through training drills structured around benchmarking data. Through group dynamics, the creation of specific student groups considered the factors of diversity, the abilities and backgrounds and needs of individual students, with the collaboration with the Year 2 teachers to create diverse groups of 8 to 9 students. Through week 1 benchmarking, the strategy was to complete benchmarking as a measure of the student's skill development through the program pre, mid and post to track the improvement journey. The benchmarking criteria consisted of observing and recording skills data of the fundamental skills of the sport of AFL to see development and progression through the stages of learning. Observations of large frequent errors, limited ability to follow instructions, and the students consistently distracted by irrelevant cues all provided evidence to suggest all students were within the cognitive stage of learning. It was observed that specific students who had AFL experience consisted of Patrick and Toby, seen in the benchmarking where most targets were hit, whereas others, specifically Josh, Evangelia and Violet, all struggled with the completion of skills, scoring in the lower bands of the benchmark. Week 1 game data and observations highlighted the struggles of congested play, with players running all over the field with no positional play, the physical nature of the game and the experience for less experienced students, especially female students. Through game data, Patrick gained many possessions compared to the other students, and it was evident that this was due to the lack of basic skills of the handballing and kicking being a struggle for many, showing that the focus areas for the following week would be to improve skill execution, which then would increase participation. As cognitive learners, students were selective in what they focused on with their attention span, and this was affected the skill execution. Feedback given was very limited in the first week to see skills, and complete benchmarking data to see the best improvement. Zach and I met at the end of week 1 during our lesson to collaboratively analyse our week 1 results and our plan for week 2's session as seen on screen. Through the analysis of week 1 benchmarking data, the aims and outcomes for week 2 were based around the specific skill development of kicking and handballing as fundamentals to improve game statistics, with the highest kicking accuracy being 60% from the benchmarking. Video analysis along with benchmarking data suggested Violet and Josh were specifically cognitive learners, gaining 0 out of 5 for the kicking benchmarking, needing skill development through technical coaching. Through observations, we had cognitive learners with skill execution being challenged due to the complication of the motor programs and open motor skills, producing large frequent errors. In an attempt to close down the skill, we used visual representation of the skill required with specific feedback to limit the non-relevant cues, arousal levels and excitement levels, disrupting skill execution, controlling uncoordinated movements, and through chunking of the skill was closed down. To ensure all student stages of learning were met, the implementation of strategies from week 1 and observations were: these strategies throughout the main activities increased both skill and participation development by reducing irrelevant cues, slightly decreasing frequency of errors, and increased repetition of motor programs. The analysis of data and observations of Game 1 provided strategies which were implemented into Week 2's game. Collaborative group meetings created game rules which included field split into 3 zones, forward, mid and back line, opening up the field, increasing participation, greater involvement and less congested. Introduction of no tackling, the 3-touch rule, increased confidence to pick up the ball, creating a safer environment and more time to make decisions, increasing success of performance. Introduction introduction of one bounce rule focusing on passing, increasing participation of other students and unable to run all over the field. Through the implementation of game strategies, observations showed greater ball movement and less congestion, allowing for scoring of goals in comparison to week 1, 0 to 3 goals. Both the single bounce rule and no tackling rules increased the involvement of all students, increasing the number of handballs and kicks achieved during week 2 from 2 to 13 handballs and 18 to 24 kicks. Through mid-program benchmarking, the opportunity to measure the levels of improvement provided further data indicating progression and the areas of improvement through future strategies in week 4's session plan. In the comparison of pre and mid benchmarking, gradual progression was indicated by increased accuracy of hitting targets, where the majority of students gained an increase of one target hit in the mid-program benchmarking. Further indicated the progression through the stages of learning, where differences in skill level and development were observed and backed by data, where Patrick progressed the associative stage of learning through consistency and frequency of errors, whereas Josh and Violet showed no progression and a slight decrease in benchmarking results, indicating that they were still within the cognitive stage of learning, still making frequent large errors. The analysis of data and observations of Game 2 provided additional strategies and rule changes which were implemented into Week 3's game. Collaborative group class meetings created game rules which included umpires and coaches select certain players to take kick-ins and free kicks to increase participation, no kicking off the ground to prevent injury and also increase the quality of skills progression, and to keep the ball off the ground to allow students to have increased confidence to pick the ball up. 2 hands on the ball was to be paid a mark to give students all involved. Tactical coaches telling students to pass the ball around more instead of kicking along and running, holding them onto the ball, increasing skill development of each player with increasing participation of other students around them. Through the implementation of new rules and game strategies, Game 3 data suggested that the paid mark rule and tactical coaching implementation involved more students in the game, which the data showed with more marks were taken, with 6 in week 2 compared to 13 in week 3, further developing the skill and involving other students through disposal after the mark. This increased motivation because they were being rewarded, therefore students' willingness to be involved increased with due to confidence. Through observations, tactically increased participation increased both kicking and handballing, involving others more with the movement of the ball around the field more efficiently, with many handballs occurring, 13 in week 2 compared to 27 in week 3, increasing the skill development through repetition of the motor program. Through the analysis of Week 3 benchmarking data, specific drills were created through the introduction of surreal skills to simulate game-like situations. Video analysis and benchmarking data suggested that Violet and Josh were still cognitive learners with little to no improvement and large frequent errors still occurring, whereas Toby began to progress into the associative stage of learning, with motor programs being executed successfully with minimal error, gaining at least 4 out of 5 for all benchmarking skills except for goal kicking. Observations along with benchmarking data indicated the need for visual representation and specific feedback for skill development through Week 4's session as a coaching strategy. The size of errors with a focus on the knowledge of performance rather than knowledge of results. To ensure that various stages of learning were met during Week 4, the implementation of strategies from Week 3 observations of these Week 4 session strategies further developed students the closing down of the specific skills of kicking and kicking for goal and handballing. Fundamental movements and motor skills were focused on through the ball drop, head over the ball, toe pointed, ball grip, and ball contact with the foot. Focusing on the straight kick at the target and focusing on small, short distances, reducing motor movement. Through observation, the success of the gender-based games greatly progressed students as learners and increased skill development and participation, specifically through the girls' games. Through the analysis of mixed gender game statistics, the girls' students benefited from the gender-based games through the execution and accumulation of possessions being low and not present. Therefore, the gender-based game progression into Week 4 was beneficial to the confidence and skill development of the girls' students, therefore the reasoning for the development change. Through the collaboration analysis of Game 3 data, decisions were made to further restructure games to promote participation and skill development. Strategies and rules changes which were implemented into Week 4's games through the group meetings included. Through the implementation of both gender-based games and goal kicking as a focus from benchmarking data, students became more confident and included and involved within gameplay. Game 4 data showed that the girls gained a greater participation, increasing their possession of the ball dramatically, especially Violet gaining 3 kicks and a handball compared to 1 kick in Week's 3 games. The gender-based games further developed the students' ability to perform motor programs with students of their abilities and backgrounds in the sport of AFL, involving others around them and themselves, improving the standard of game. The implementation of goal kicking in Week's 4 session improved accuracy of scoring, with a total of 3 goals and 0 points kicked in Week 4 compared to 6 goals and 3 points in Week 3, showing improvement through the data of repetition of the skill to cause development. Through gender-based games, coaches work collaboratively to collect data data to share the best experience was achieved for all students. Through collaboration of groups for benchmarking to maximise the collection of post-program benchmarking data, the opportunity to measure the overall improvement through an increase in participation was achieved. Through comparison, improvement was seen through goal kicking from weeks 3 to 5, where there was an increase in the average goals kicked from the benchmarking from 46 to 66% of goals kicked due to week 4's skill development and specific goal kicking, technical coaching and drills. Kicking and handballing improved over the 5 weeks through technical coaching and removing cues to close down the skill and improve the kicking from week 1 benchmarking from 32% of targets hit to 68%, and handballing improved from 62% of targets hit in week 1 benchmarking to 77%. Students progressed from the cognitive to associative stages of learning, and further students, specifically Patrick, through specific skills were able to progress to the autonomous stage of learning, further switching between associative and autonomous stages depending on the specific skill. Through the analysis of data and observations from week 4's gender-based games, the group gained the best participation and skill development through increased confidence. Through observation, the implementation of specific ability group gender-based games based off Game 4 data to further benefit skill development and participation would see the future strategy for week 5 to maximise skill development and through participation. Through this strategy, the continuation of skill development through the specific games of students having roughly the same ability competing with one another, allowing students to grow in confidence, especially through the girls' game, where the data showed that further development was evident with there being an average of 2.5 kicks and 2.5 handballs in week 4, and a further skill development of week 5 with 3.75 kicks and 3 handballs, further developing skills of the students and motor programs through further participation-based ability games. To summarise the Year 2 AFL experience, the SMART goal of increasing skill development and participation was achieved and evident through the strategies implemented that was informed by the analysis of benchmarking data and game statistics, through progressing into gender-based games where the zoning of the field, rule modifications, specifically no tackling and one bounce rule work. Communication and collaboration with Zach and fellow class members contributed to the successful achievement of our SMART goal, which was evident through group and class meetings, data analysis of the program and planning. These strategies, along with demonstrations, simplified feedback that was clear, and closing down of skills were key to the students in our group progressing through the stages of learning from cognitive to associative and some skill movements, the autonomous stage of learning.